This landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turned left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified. UFO Classified. No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome, my friends, to Friday night on UFO Classified. I hope you've had such a fantastic week. I know I have. It has been actually quite lovely and warm here in Salt Lake City. I know Northern UFOs and all of my friends back east and up in Canada are freezing, and I hope you are all okay. I want to say thank you to Northern UFOs for always posting my show and getting the word out and supporting me. I can see Norm in chat and a lot of my Amy Collins. I just think the world of you. Tracy from Utah. You guys are the reason that I'm here, and I love it. Last week's show with Phil Leach was a barn burner. That one will be, no doubt, forever etched in our minds as it should be, and that needs to get out there, and things need to start coming to a head. Phil broke open some things with regard to MUFON and their way of dealing with things, which, as I know personally, as many others who have been involved in the organization, we know that there is something that is just not right about the way headquarters handles things with regard to personnel and data and investigating cases, et cetera, et cetera. I know that the board of directors supposedly met and they were going to be briefing Jan and giving them their suggestions for making changes at MUFON, but my bet would be there won't be any change, and at the end of the day it will still be the same people in control and bullying people in their lower ranks, which is unfortunate because there are a lot of good people in that organization. Never fear, though, I have been on it. I've been investigating this behind the scenes for many years now and have a lot of good information. And next week, we might just have a special surprise on UFO Classified. So I know all of my MUFON people from headquarters are probably listening, so I hope you tune in next Friday. It will be good for you. Tonight, my guest is someone who has been in this subject a long time, and he has also had his share of controversy, which we will talk about that tonight. I'm here with Robert Kiviat, who is best known for helping Fox News establish its alternative TV department with a highly rated primetime documentary, such specials like Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction. I know we've all seen that. UFOs, the best evidence ever caught on tape, 1 and 2, Miracles and Visions, Fact or Fiction, Prophecies of the Millennium, World's Greatest Hoaxes, Secrets Finally Revealed, and Ghosts Caught on Tape, Fact or Fiction. Media outlets have called his production company the Fox Network's Real X-Files documentary unit, leading NBC Universal Sci-Fi to ask him to develop a series which delved into similar fact-based X-Files type stories. He has also been passionate in unraveling a lot of unexplained mysteries and began his early years the top producer of NBC's Unsolved Mysteries. His Canadian UFO story about a hovering disc-shaped craft videotaped by a mysterious source known only as The Guardian gave that NBC hit series some of its highest ratings. He did a segment on Miracle at Fatima, which inspired a visit to the Vatican and many other things. I mean, Bob, I have to say that we could go on and on about your bio because you've done so much. I know recently you were on Jimmy Church, and there's a lot of excitement surrounding you at the moment with what you're involved in.
Well, thank you, Erica. I appreciate it much. Interesting.
Absolutely. So for the listeners that aren't familiar with you and your background, how did you first get involved in delving into some of the unexplained areas?
Well, I think like a lot of people, I had interest in this from a very early age. Was a big fan of people like Rod Serling and the people that found a way to get into the issues of whether or not we're being visited, whether aliens are real, whether other mysteries tie into that, like you said, miracles, ghosts, things that I think now the government seems to be calling phenomenology. I seem to have kind of like been into something called phenomenology from the very beginning, and then I decided years later to leave the advertising industry and come into the TV business because I felt there was a lack of coverage of this kind of thing on network television. And I noticed a show come on TV years ago called Unsolved Mysteries. And I said to myself, this is something that I think I could kind of cut my teeth on. And one thing led to another, and I got on that show. There were things before that we can get into, but just to cut to the chase, I mean, NBC's Unsolved Mysteries in the late 80s was the most popular show ever of this type of thing. It was a top 20 show, which at that time was, considered to be a big deal. When you say an NBC or any other ABC, NBC or Fox, those three mainly, or four, CBS of course, four. If you get a show on those networks and you have this kind of a subject matter, you're getting the material in front of many, many, many millions of people at the same time. So hence the word broadcasting, So that was the idea, to take the material to the highest viewership possible and do it in an investigatory kind of way, the same way that 60 Minutes, the same way that any other news organization would do it. But in my case, it turned out that the NBC Unsolved Mysteries was the first place I was able to do it, and did it there for a few years. And then the Fox network was getting their whole big thing going. And just to clarify something you said at the beginning of the introduction, it was not Fox News. Fox News Channel is a completely different animal, and we'll get into that. The Fox network in the 80s and early 90s was this upstart network that was trying to cut, through the clutter and be seen. And they had a couple of good shows on at the time. There was actually a syndicated show on called The Current Affair that came on just about the same time as Unsolved Mysteries. And Maury Povich, people may remember, Maury Povich was the host at the beginning of that show. And that, again, was a Rupert Murdoch show. It was a syndicated show called, A Current Affair. And they also got very heavily into UFOs. People may forget that in the 1980s, like late 80s, A Current Affair was getting into stories like the Voronezh case in Russia, where apparently kids said they saw this being shoot a ray gun of some kind at them, and people in this park announced that in Russia that they had been, more or less attacked by this robotic type alien, and the New York Times wrote about it. So it was the kind of thing in the late 80s and into the early 90s, Erica. People may forget it was extremely hot. If people think the subject matter was kind of hot now, it was ridiculously hot back then. In fact, right up until the time 9/11 happened, it really was a very burgeoning subject. And I think that's something we should get into tonight as well. But to make it simple for you and your listeners, I've always had an interest in this. I was the editor of my college paper in New York, State School in New York. I felt we should be getting into it even then. I even kind of freaked out some of my professors in the New York State School, where I said that I thought that I said to my professor, who actually was an advisor, he said to me once at an event, he said, "Now that you're the editor of the college paper here, Bob, what do you think the most important subject matter is? What should we really care about?" And I said, well, I think it's important for people our age to be concerned about the military and what's going on with our world. And, we may get that's when there was even things like draft. We had to worry about things like that even, and I said, I'm in my 50s, if everyone understands my age. And so, I figured back then I would freak them out a little. And I said, hey, I think it's important for people our age in college to care about whether we're going to get drafted and go in the military. We may have a nuclear war. Who knows? I'm concerned about things like that. And also, I think it's important to know whether extraterrestrials are real, because I think they could come back and maybe help avert a war if necessary. I think they're kind of watching us. And he looked at me like I was crazy, and he walked away. But I think that's true. I think we are potentially looking at an otherworldly presence watching our planet and looking at our nuclear proliferation and is very concerned. And in my first show we did for Fox, Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, you can see in the graphic open, I sort of made a little commentary in my little graphic open that the nuclear bombs may have attracted them to Roswell, New Mexico. And we can get into that too. I think the history is pretty clear for anybody into UFOs. They should be aware that Roswell was where the bomb wing really was that bombed Japan in World War II. So if you're an alien race looking at the Earth, hypothetically, you're looking at Roswell because you want to know where those planes come from. Well, wait a second. Roswell was where it happened. So who knows? That's a good segue, I guess, to tell you really what I was about. I was trying to figure out as a young guy, what is the connection between all of this? But that's general overview for you.
Well, thank you. And I want to ask you, going back to A Current Affair, which I used to watch. I mean, that was a great show back in the 80s. But you mentioned the case in Russia. Did you notice back in that time period that there was maybe news outlets or shows were using some of this as propaganda?
Oh, I don't think so. I think this idea, Erica, that the media or the government has kind of utilized, producers or utilized the airwaves to kind of, meld or kind of like affect the interest in UFOs especially. I have never seen any evidence at all that they were meddling, trying to affect things until fairly recently. I think what I did notice was historically there were two instances in history. Any student of this should know that in 1974, roughly, the United States government, through the Nixon administration, seemed interested in trying to make a documentary with Bob Emenegger, who was an advertising executive who had some connections to the White House. And he was more or less invited to make a documentary about the truth about UFOs. And it was eventually hosted by Rod Serling, which was really great because as a kid, as I said before, I was really fascinated by Rod Serling, and a great writer and a great mind. And he wanted to make science fiction a big part of our culture, and he wanted to make commentary. So there he was hosting on camera, as we say, a documentary for Bob Emenegger. It was called UFOs Past, Present, and Future. It's had a couple of titles, but overall it was a show that Bob Emenegger was told he would get absolute proof, video or film evidence of UFOs and aliens visiting our Earth, and he was told that would be the key to this documentary, and that was when government involvement was real. It was absolutely involved. They were involved. Bob Emenegger and I spoke actually just about maybe 5-6 months ago, just because of my recent work, and we'll talk about that. And he basically said yes. Yeah, he confirmed that there was this promise to provide him true video or film evidence of either UFOs landing or alien visitation of some kind. And believe it or not, in this documentary to this day, I firmly believe there is about 8 seconds of footage of a flying saucer possibly landing at Holloman Air Force Base. There's a lot of controversy about these 6 to 8 seconds of footage. It's very, very pulled back. It's very far away. But you do see what appears to be authentic footage, kind of edited into this documentary. And one has to wonder, well, why would they have pulled back the material if they were going to give it to Bob Emenegger? And the idea seems to be that during the Nixon Watergate scandal, it was just not the right time, so they pulled it back. And then again in 1988, apparently there was this show called UFO Cover-Up Live, where apparently, again, government operatives were working with producers to give them information. But unfortunately, it was a mixed bag. It was not all true evidence, and it was a mixture, and probably very little evidence per se. But what's interesting is the word Area 51 did come out of that. The Area 51 base was never really on the cultural landscape until that show. But that was also the show, you may remember, legend. It's like a legend that they had this government operative type guy, which is very, very mysterious.
Richard Doty.
Well, the idea of Richard Doty, that's a whole nother can of worms. But whoever was representing this material, whether it was an actor playing the part of a government operative or it was Richard Doty, regardless, the commentary was, well, we have these aliens and they're our guests and they like strawberry ice cream. Well, that's nice. They like strawberry ice cream. But the point is, so what? Is that all we're going to hear about the aliens? They love strawberry ice cream. So again, Mike Farrell from the show MASH was the host, and it was kind of a nightmare. Anybody who sees that show, even today, gets a bit of a headache because you see Gulf Breeze, Florida portrayed very well. Gulf Breeze, Florida is a very interesting UFO case, and we'll get into what the CIA's top scientist seems to think about that. He's told me quite about it lately. And he's the same individual I'm involved in a lawsuit with right now, which we'll talk about. But more than anything, that's a general view of what I think the last two times there was absolute government involvement. The most recent, of course, appears to be this, if you can believe it, this To the Stars Academy situation and the New York Times article written in 2017, December of 2017, where apparently some people in the government seem to want us to believe that there were UFOs 25 feet wide, 50 feet long, in the shape of what appears to be a pill, like a Tic Tac, coming in from outer space. Many of them, by the way, not just one, potentially hundreds of them, hovering and coming down to the ocean. Literally, let's imagine this: the aircraft carrier group called the Nimitz in 2004 is having their nuclear exercises, and lo and behold, they've been constantly not harassed, but these craft were coming in from outer space and dropping from 80,000 feet to 20,000 feet to 50 feet above the ocean, like in a second or two. And what started to happen was it became this big story now that we know as the Nimitz UFO encounter. But we can get into that tonight because there's a lot of problems with the story, a lot of problems with the New York Times coverage. I think it's endemic with the news media. They just don't seem to understand the beat. They don't understand this. If you don't know the beat, you shouldn't be doing a story. And if you're going to do a story, it should not be a puff piece. It should be an investigatory. It should be an investigation. It should be a serious investigation. It was not. It was about as much a PR piece as you could ever get from the New York Times. And that, being a kid who grew up in New York, I got to tell you, I think it's an embarrassment to the New York Times. And they're going to have to make some changes in their coverage on this story because I'm now about to break some more of the truth about the story. And it's going to be a little bit ugly for the New York Times because they're going to realize their lack of coverage.
And that'll be interesting. We have so much to talk about tonight, and I wanted to just ask you. You had mentioned the Emenager film, with there being about 8 seconds where there was. I mean, it's been rumored that there was actual footage, and the alien autopsy. I mean, you hear in conspiracy circles as well that there was actual footage from an actual alien autopsy in that film.
Yeah, we'll have to break this down one by one tonight, Erica. But if you want to talk about the Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction show hosted by Jonathan Frakes that I made for Fox, then we can talk about that. That has an entire tapestry of intrigue. To this day, I do believe that one of the most important things about that show is that a gentleman named Michael Maloney, who was a Royal Academy press photographer. He came to America in the 70s. And in an update to that show I did that came out years later, that has not aired in America, by the way, and we'll get into that, why it has not. It was a show called Alien Autopsy, The True Story. And in that kind of fourth edition or fifth edition of my series called Alien Autopsy, we showed Michael Maloney. And he came on, he said, look, I was a Royal Academy press photographer. I had shot the Queen, the Kings, all the famous people of the world. I was invited to come to the Disney studios. I was there for some other reason. And then these people who worked for Disney told me they had film the government had given them of an alien being worked on like an autopsy. And he said, "Wait, what?" He said, "Yeah." And they showed him the footage, apparently, allegedly. And he watched the footage and he was shocked. And then all of a sudden, years later, there was my show, Alien Autopsy Fact or Fiction, premiering on Fox. And he said, "Oh my God, that's the same footage, only it's different. The footage I saw was very similar. The phone was there. The room looked similar. But the difference," he said, in our new show called Alien Autopsy of the True Story, he said that the alien on the table, there was one that was dead, but there was another alien just like it on the floor underneath the table, writhing in pain, alive. So imagine he's describing an alien autopsy sequence in color, by the way, not black and white, that looked very, very similar, but the difference was that there was a live alien writhing on the floor. Now, why would that be? Why would there be a dead alien maybe on the table and a live alien on the floor? Now, he doesn't know the answer to that, but he's the one who's more or less put the word out to many people over the last 10, 20 years that alien autopsy matched exactly what he had seen. Now, that's a real problem when you know what the story about alien autopsy was. This gentleman named Ray Chantilly in England acquired some footage from an old cameraman, allegedly. It doesn't seem to match exactly. So the question really is, was alien autopsy some type of a test to see if we could handle the real footage if it ever was shown? So it's a very interesting story. We'll get into that if you want.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's so much. It is an interesting story. It's been surrounded by controversy since it came out, and it's one of those things. I think of the Jaime Maussan incident, where the Roswell slides and all of those things, and it just seemed to have that air of controversy around it. And
well, if you want to talk about Jaime Maussan, we can do that too. I mean, I put him on television. I was the first guy to put him on TV at Unsolved Mysteries, and he was an extremely credible journalist, nice guy. I found him in Mexico. He was doing a show called 60 Minutos, 60 Minutes of Mexico. He was sort of the Dan Rather of, their country. And he basically was very credible. And in 1991, he was the one who broke the story that over an hour or so during a solar eclipse on July 11th, 1991, there appeared to have been 4 different flying saucers videotaped in 4 different locations, or at least 3 different locations in Mexico. And the video footage, you can see it tonight if you want to go to Netflix. I'll give them a little plug right now. If you want to go on Netflix tonight, you can watch UFOs, the best evidence ever caught on tape, #1, and there's 2 shows there. It was a little series I did for Fox. You can also see Alien Autopsy if you want on Netflix as well. And you'll notice that in that show, I showed this July 11th event, but I sort of broke it on Unsolved Mysteries. And that's really what happened. I broke the show at Unsolved Mysteries with Jaime Maussan. We did a Mexico UFO case. But we covered it later in my own shows, and I think we should talk about Jaime because he's a very interesting guy. But that Roswell slide thing, that's a joke, Erica. That was
that was certainly interesting. I am Erica Lukes here, and I thank you for being here, Bob. We're going to have a great night, I have no doubt, because there's important information about Utah that we need to talk about. So I'm here with Bob Kiviat. Make sure you go to UFOclassified.com to check out the latest, and we will catch you on the other side of the break.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified
with Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Urgent.
Hello, KCOR listeners. Lori and Fenton here. Hey, are you ready for UFO MegaCon, the Immersion event? 7 days, 8 nights, 50 new speakers, UFO military witnesses, experiencer groups, skywatches, and so much more. Join me at UFO MegaCon March 24th through 30th in Laughlin, Nevada. Truly the one and only conference you need to attend this year. Check it out at UFOMegaCon.com.
If you love them enough to barely sleep then surely you'll check nhtsa.gov/the right seat to make sure they're in the right car seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Now, broadcasting in digital HD radio.
Toxins are everywhere, from the air we breathe to the food we eat and the water we drink. In a world where 80,000 known toxins and heavy metals threaten our very existence, how are you going to protect yourself and your loved ones? Introducing Pure Body Extra Strength, the world's first colloidal zeolite that helps trap and remove toxins as well as heavy metals from your body that are messing with your memory, clarity, sleep, and focus. Don't just take our word for it or the testimonials from our thousands of happy customers. Check out the hundreds of articles and case studies on the National Institute of Health website proving zeolite's powerful ability to remove toxins. For a limited time, listeners to KCOR will receive 10% off their first order. To get started, go to trypurebody.com and enter promo code RADIO10. Again, that's trypurebody.com. Toxic junk is all around us, but now you can take back control of your health and protect yourself by detoxing with Pure Body Extra Strength. You'll be on your way to sleeping better, thinking more clearly, and feeling more energetic. Go to trypurebody.com right now and get started today.
Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific. Jump onto the Celestial Highway and travel at the speed of light. Into hyperspace. Hyperspace. Hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. She navigates you through the cosmic tides of mysticism into the world of covert technology, UFOs, mystical sciences, and the world of unforeseen forces.
You get to really sort of enjoy a bizarre ride.
Listen live, Friday night, 9 p.m. Pacific, for Hyperspace, the one show that blows the whistle off our government black ops projects. Hyperspace, hosted by Solaris Blue Raven. Exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Want to take a ride?
Are you ready to go? It's showtime!
You're listening to the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
Crank this up.
Broadcasting from the heart of Las Vegas, Nevada.
Their base is so large it has to draw most of its power from the nearby nuclear fusion plant.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts!
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes.
Welcome back. I was happy to be here, and I want to thank everybody in my audience for reaching out, getting the information out about UFO Classified. I am amazed at the letters that I get from all over the world. Thank you for reaching out to me and understanding that we have to get good, credible work out there. We have to be willing to shine a spotlight on corrupt practices, unethical research, or unethical behavior, which is especially prominent here in the United States, and that really cheapens and demeans this whole subject and demoralizes good people. Probably what I'm talking about. I don't need to mention anything else. So there you have that. I am here now with Bob Kiviat, who is best known for the Fox News network for doing alien autopsy, fact or fiction, UFOs, the best evidence. I mean, all of these things that I've seen. It's amazing because I've watched your stuff for years.
I appreciate that, but I still have to correct you, Erica.
Yes, I know. And I have to say it's in your bio, so I need to get this.
Well, it shouldn't be. I think it's a typo somewhere. That should not be there. Fox News is a fairly newer advent. It is a thing that I would call a conservative channel for people that want their conservative spin on news and things like that on cable. That is it has nothing to do with the Fox Broadcasting Network or Fox Broadcasting, which is what we now, if you have I'm in LA on Channel 11, New York is Channel 5, over the air, conventional network, one of the 4 big networks. Those are the people I made my shows for. Fox News Channel and I have no connection. I've never been on Fox News Channel. I might be coming on soon, but not right now.
And Tucker Carlson? Are you going to go on Tucker Carlson?
Well, Tucker needs to have me on because Tucker's out there flapping in the wind, not really knowing what he's covering, again, because he doesn't know the beat. And I really respect Tucker for trying. It's really interesting. Tucker is trying to look into this as a somewhat novice journalist type guy who's trying to figure out what's true about the Tic Tac case, what's true about David Fravor, what's true about Lou Elizondo, what's true about Chris Mellon, what's true about the whole cast of characters. And I'll be glad to tell him, and I'll be glad to tell your listeners tonight. This is an area that you almost prepare for. You have to know when a story comes along like this. It's sort of like when you work at a newspaper or a magazine years ago, which I come from originally, and I had my segue through the advertising business to the TV business by doing print journalism. And I understand in print journalism, very much so, you are known for your beat. Let's say you have a room of people and the editor of the paper goes, okay, Bob, what's up with the City Hall beat? Tell us what's going on there. Okay, Bill, what's up with the garbage disposal beat? Okay, what's with and there are people that know their stuff, or City Hall beat, you know what I mean? And so you know your stuff. Well, in this field, you have to know your stuff. You can't just take on a story without knowing anything. You'd have to study like crazy. I say this to Ralph Blumenthal. I say this to Cooper. And I really say this to people that have brought them into this, like Leslie Kean, because what you do is you kind of set them up for a fall by not being able to do the job properly because it's not their beat. And I chose years ago to make UFOs and unexplained phenomena and the related subjects my beat. So I give it 1,000% of my time. I devote all my time to it, to the other chagrin of the people in my life sometimes. They wonder, why are you so focused on this, Bob? Why are you doing this? Because if UFOs, let's say, are visiting the Earth, what's a bigger story than that, If miracles are occurring and there's some kind of wondrous supernatural connection to our world and there may even be messages coming into us, shouldn't we be aware of that? So again, it may sound crazy to people, but what's more important than these subjects? Is there life after death? I think we all want to know about that, right? So again, are ghosts real? So this is the interesting thing. And so,
Yeah, and I have to just say, to be the devil's advocate, when the New York Times, December 17th, from my recollection, when that piece came out, I will say as somebody who researches this, I felt like that was vindication. I thought that was one of the first times that this subject has been presented in a manner like that and put out to the public, and it gave it, in my opinion, credibility. And so that was a cool thing for me.
Well, I mean, I'm not sure what to say on that, but I will tell you this. It seems right now that the world is looking at the New York Times article and wondering, what the hell? You cover it for one day on a Sunday or Saturday, and the next thing you know, you don't cover it anymore? It's nuts. There should have been a series of articles on this. There should be people calling the Pentagon going, can you please tell us where these videos came from? They didn't come from the DOD. We know that. The DOD is totally saying, we didn't release this. Lou Elizondo has conflated so many things to make it appear that there was some kind of official division of the military that released or declassified or unclassified these videos. It doesn't appear to be so. It does not. So the question is, where did they really come from? Why can't they give us the exact, planes, who shot them, etc.? David Fravor's tried to explain that, but he hasn't really done a very good job. He's trying to explain it. He says he saw a UFO or Tic Tac craft. It went really, in a crazy manner around this water disturbance, and then he went in there and tried to see what it was doing, and it sort of outflanked them and went into the wild blue yonder. And it sounds great, but the person that shot the footage that we are talking about, the FLIR footage, this very short sequence from the 2004 event, that footage is completely mysterious. It's almost as like the video was released in 2008 somehow, somewhere. No one knows exactly how it got out there. It's very messy. Then it kind of went away, and then it came back, and the government allegedly, according to Lou Elizondo, goes, we're going to declassify this or unclassify it. Well, wait a minute. It was out already. What are you talking about? You can't declassify something that's already out in the public and then pull back. It's a mess. I mean, we could spend hours on this, but the reality is the New York Times, and as an avid reader, as a kid growing up and really believing it had a real important place in our culture, to not do that story well is egregious, in my opinion.
And I think that from my dealings with the media, and I've been very politically active and had some things happen here in Utah, knowing how, people in media don't dig very deep these days.
They used to,
but that's not the typical thing. It's like they're on to the next and the next and the next. And so, with regard to the UFO topic, nobody's taken it seriously for 50 years. So
no, not nobody.
Well, but it's like
yours truly does, and that's my point to you, Erica. There are people, and there are very few, and that's why I kind of cut my teeth on the subject matter years ago, because I realized there was a dearth, there was a lack of this. It has gotten even ridiculously so now in our clickbait universe. Also, to be fair to my journalistic brethren, the money's not there. They're not paying journalists anything. I would say it's analogous to teachers. If you knew what the average writer at the New York Times makes, if you knew the average, way you can make a living in New York, let's say, you could barely earn enough money on those papers to live in Manhattan. So that's the problem we're living in right now. We don't have any respect for journalists in general, and our president right now. Everything with him is fake news. That's not helping anybody. That's not giving us a sense that we care about journalism.
Oh no, it's putting people in danger, journalists specifically. So
absolutely.
Yeah, that is, and so since you've been in this for so long, you've seen so many people. But as you have mentioned, and we had a conversation the other day, we see the same names that have resurfaced decade after decade.
It's like a Rolodex, or it's like a journalist, beat book, as we would call it. These names have been in my files, if you will, my book from the beginning of my work. I can tell you the story pretty clearly, and you keep alluding to Utah. Surely because you're there, but there has been in the last 2 years a complete focus on Utah. By some members of the government, apparently, especially we'll just call it the CIA and the intelligence community. And previous to that, there was this interest in this thing called Skinwalker Ranch, which, for all intents and purposes, is one of the biggest myths I've ever seen created in terms of what's really, truly phenomenal, what's documentable, what we could say surely is an unexplained kind of place or events occurring there. And, Skinwalker Ranch in Utah used to be the only real thing that you would say is phenomenal in Utah. People would say, well, what's up with UFOs and phenomena in Utah? Well, Skinwalker Ranch, boy, we've heard a lot of things happening there. Almost all anecdotal, almost zero documentable evidence. We would do these shows for the Fox network in the 90s, Erica, and into 2000, 2001, too. And then also now, more recently, I did a show for NBC Universal Sci-Fi a couple of years ago called Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed. You can see it on Amazon Prime today. We would never even think about conflating or involving Skinwalker Ranch in any of these shows because nothing was happening there that we could verify. With all due respect to George Knapp, who I really do have respect for, and I like to think of him as a friend. He's in my show, UFOs, the best evidence ever caught on tape. You can see it on Netflix tonight. He did a wonderful job, the younger George Knapp. A fantastic job when I interviewed him, explaining Area 51 footage, things that were happening all across the UFO spectrum. George and I used to share many stories together. We would talk a lot, especially about Russia and what Russia knew about UFOs. But this complete focus on Skinwalker Ranch and Bob Bigelow that George has really put his energy into is questionable, to say the least. And I like George a lot. But I think we got to talk more about this. It's really interesting.
And I have to say, from a Utah researcher's perspective, and having been out there in the Uinta Basin and having spent days and days and days at the Special Archives at the University of Utah, going through Dr. Frank Salisbury's lifetime's work in the Uinta Basin, or with Junior Hicks, who's a hero in my opinion. He's got over 700 case reports from that area and Skinwalker Ranch. I mean, I have a hard time thinking that there's nothing going on there. I know personally I have been right on the border of the ranch and have seen things that I can't
What have
explain.
you seen, Eric? What have you seen you can't
I have just seen things that I will be talking about at a later date, but I can tell you that I've seen some pretty incredible things that I can't explain, as have many other people in that area, and they've been very affected by it. Enough that government money, that $22 million essentially, if you kind of break through that New York Times article and cut through the clutter of it, you seem to realize that Harry Reid took the initiative and steered money toward Bob Bigelow. And Bob Bigelow's main activity was to operate Skinwalker Ranch. But I will say, though, his actually, and this is where what I would like to find out: how much money did go into Skinwalker Ranch, and then how much money did Bigelow use to purchase the MUFON database, to purchase all the UFO databases? Because my guess would be a lot of that money went to purchasing databases.
Why? Not to cut you off, but why would you buy UFO databases? What would be the point of that?
Because you can get in there and you can analyze the data, figure out where hotspots
But he did not. But he did not. And this, I'm going to be really, really direct with you tonight. Okay, and this is basically the direction people are going to see my work take now. It's time for a reality check on this subject matter. To interview me about this at this time, you must understand that I have put my life into this. And when I see nonsense occurring, both in the UFO field, the government giving money toward people that are not doing what you say, Bob Bigelow has done zero in terms of taking UFO cases, breaking them down, bringing them to the public, describing them to the public openly. That's the job. Why would you possibly, if you have money, buy up, these cases, if you will, and then secretly study them? What would be the point of that? The government has their own, auspices. They can look into that. Why would Bob Bigelow be looking into UFOs when the government must have tons of opportunity, access, money? $22 million is nothing. Bob Bigelow has a lot of explaining to do, as the old Lucy show said, a lot of explaining to do, and that's where I'm at. I'm going to be coming to these people now. They're not going to be very happy, and apparently they're going to be trying to avoid me, it looks like. But unfortunately, that's where we're headed. This Skinwalker Ranch story is an interesting one. And it's really in your neck of the woods, so maybe we'll be talking some more about it. But not the usual suspects, doing the analysis, doing the investigation. There'll be new people coming in now, people that are coming in with more of a journalistic edge, who do not have any agenda. With all due respect to George Knapp, he has a relationship with Bob Bigelow. That relationship has been one of, listen, in my opinion, it's this kind of thing. Hey, George, you work with me in the way I want to, and I'll give you some access. And George's view is, okay, Bob, thanks a lot, whatever you say. Instead of, listen, I'm George Knapp. I'm a journalist. I want to know the truth. I want to get to the truth. Let's get there together instead of this limited hangout, which the government does, where they give all kinds of information, a mixed bag. That should not happen when it's coming, let's say, from a journalist. And I think George needs to understand I'm not in any way besmirching him or I'm attacking him as a human being or as a journalist, but the work itself needs to be upticked. It needs to be objective, it needs to be open, and it needs to not be one of a publicist or a PR director. It needs to be of an investigative journalist and ask direct questions. Where's the evidence? Let me see it. Let's get into it. Let's drop the intrigue. It's boring. It's ridiculous.
Well, I have to just say that, to be honest, I mean, I respect George a lot, and I think he's done great work. And
That's why he's in my show. That's why he's in my show. That's why we invited him in our program. But again, it's the old expression. Where are we now? Where are we now? What has it all led to? Okay, Bob Bigelow is no longer the owner of Skinwalker Ranch. Don't we want to know what's going on there? Don't we want to have any kind of interest in what's going on there? We don't want to have it all be wrapped up in black budget type things. We want to know what the truth is. Why not?
I think that we should know the truth about a lot of different things. And for me, looking at some of the players that have been involved in this, the same people that we've seen decade after decade, and knowing that each of them might have the desire to steer the narrative, and specifically wondering about Ron Pandolfi, and some of the things that he has been supporting with the bouncing box and things like that. I mean,
does your viewership even know what you're talking about when you mention Ron Pandolfi, the bouncing box? So it's called the rattling box. Do you even Joe Firmage? When we get into the story tonight, how much do your listeners know about this right now?
My listeners, I've heard a little bit about it, but I think that I would appreciate you just explaining that and then getting into when you first became involved with that whole thing, because that's a huge and a very important story that I think people don't give enough attention to.
Right. By the way, let's be clear about one thing. I am making absolutely no negative comments about George Knapp's work up until, I would say, fairly recently, when this whole new round of material came out from both Harry Reid, who he had a strong relationship with, and Bob Bigelow, who he has a strong relationship with, and the Skinwalker Ranch connections to the New York Times article, which most people don't seem to see, but it's there. And I think there are people that are in denial about that, which we'll get into. And I think more than anything, because I always had an interest in people that I interviewed for my programs or interviewed for my programs to a very serious degree, I was able to glean that there were people in the government, high-level government people, that were interested in anti-gravitical research. Why would they be interested in anti-gravitical research if they were high-level government people? I was always curious about that. So one of the gentlemen that I interviewed, or was interviewed for my programs, was a guy named Admiral Bobby Ray Inman. And Bobby Ray Inman was the former director of the National Security Agency, deputy director of the CIA. In the same show I mentioned with George Knapp, you can watch it on tonight on Netflix. UFO is the best evidence ever caught on tape for the Fox network. George Knapp and Bobby Ray Inman are separated in my show by about 3 minutes. They come right after each other. And you'll notice that Admiral Bobby Ray Inman is analyzing footage for me and the show and for the Fox network. Bobby Ray Inman was actually asked to be the Secretary of Defense by Bill Clinton and eventually decided not to be. But anyway, the reason we knew Bobby Ray Inman was interested was he was caught on audio tape at one point indicating somehow to a gentleman named Bob Exler, a former NASA mission specialist, that there may be UFOs or recovered craft that we could look at and study. It was very unclear. We contacted Admiral Inman. I'd done a previous story where that was part of the story. So Admiral Inman was happy to be in our program. But after that, after we analyzed Mexico UFO footage, like I mentioned earlier, analyzed Area 51 footage, Gulf Breeze, Florida footage. He did a fantastic job for us. He said he couldn't explain what he saw. He suspected it could be military, essentially, but he wasn't sure, and he was intrigued by it, really intrigued. After the show was over, I did a little more work and studied Admiral Inman and found out he was interested in antigravitical research. And I went, whoa, and he wasn't the only one. Former astronaut Gordon Cooper was also interested in antigravitical research. Gordon Cooper claimed he saw a flying saucer land, literally, as part of the NASA program or part of his work in the military. So these are people that opened my eyes up that there could be something true about antigravitical research and even conflating to UFOs. So I stayed on that. And finally, back, I would say around 2016, when the John Podesta emails were hacked, which is a very important crosspoint in ufology. People need to understand that when John Podesta's emails were hacked, and now it appears, according to our government, that they were hacked, and they were hacked in unison with the Russians and Assange, somehow those hacked emails indicated that John Podesta, former chief of staff of the White House for Clinton, almost doing the same job for Obama later on in his career, and then becoming the campaign director for Hillary Clinton, he was really into UFOs, and he was being recruited by Tom DeLonge. And Tom DeLonge was like indicating, yeah, I'm going to get really great access, dudes. I'm going to get into access through these people. And so in 2016, when I saw that break, I went, this is a moment where I really want to see what's going on with antigravitical research, because to me, I just felt there was some connection. I just felt that. So I started looking around, and I found an aerospace company that was claiming to be able to do kind of UFO type craft or create them. They didn't have any funding. They were not very, very well to do in terms of their financing. They had none, but they had kind of a visionary, and he was interesting. So I looked at that, and then we were talking once, me and this guy who ran that company, and I said to him, hey, did you see that Joe Firmage, that former U.S. web guy who made a fortune in the dot-com boom, did you see that, and also went into UFO research, did you see that he's saying on LinkedIn that he's got like $8 million of financing to create not only possibly advanced physics, but something told me that Joe was always interested in antigravitical research. So I then went on my own, contacted Firmage, said, hey, I see these missives on LinkedIn. What's going on? And he told me he had flat out support from the CIA, and he had support from Ron Pandolfi, and he was going to create a company, and he wanted me to come into the company and help him communicate to the public what he was doing with this device that looked like it was trying to be the next level of antigravitical research.
And I've got to cut you off right there, because this is getting good. This is really important. I'm Erica Lukes. Thanks for tuning into UFO Classified. I'm here with Robert Kiviat. We're going to be right back. I will send you links to all of his shows. Stick around. The best is yet to come. Trust me.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at UFOclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from a shack just south of Area 51.
Wait, that doesn't exist.
This is the KCOR Digital Radio Network. Now for the news.
The disc landed at a ranch at Corona, New Mexico. The rancher turned it over to the Air Force. Rancher W.W. Brazell was the man who discovered the saucer.
What I thought was a star began coming in my direction at a very rapid rate of speed.
The unidentified object, which some sources thought might be a blimp, moved slowly down the Pacific coast from Santa Monica and disappeared south of Long Beach.
I saw a UFO, and it went down the river, turned right at the United Nations, turn left, and then down the river.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
No more plausible deniability. Fact, fiction, or the truth. You decide. And now, the new voice of the high desert, the hostess of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to another fascinating episode of UFO Classified. I try to do my best to bring in people who have information to give you, and we need to sit back and really listen to everything that my guests are putting forth. Last week, as I mentioned, I had probably the most listened to show of my entire career hosting radio shows, and I've had some big shows, but it was groundbreaking. Phil Leach was here talking about some of the corruption taking place in MUFON. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that the MUFON board of directors investigated all of the claims that Phil made, and probably mostly just investigated Phil. And we're going to make a determination. We will all wait with bated breath to see what MUFON is going to make changes to. Chances are they're going to be doing their same, the MUFON two-step, sidestep, go over here. We're going to wait till the press dies down, and it'll be back to the old, same old, with no changes and no reforms to make the organization better. So I will keep you posted on that. And like I said, next Friday, I'm going to have a really good show with regard to all of this. So stick around, because I've been investigating this for years. And every week, every day, I get more information from people. So on that note, I'm here with Robert Kiviat, who's best known for his primetime documentary TV specials concerning UFOs, ETs, unexplained phenomena. And he also has been raising questions about the big bombshell story that took place December 17th in the New York Times, and also some of the people involved. To the Stars Academy, we were talking about 2016 when the Podesta emails were hacked, and also CIA operative Ron Pandolfi. So where should we begin? This is just going to get good.
Well, we were left off how my shows on television. By the way, I find it fascinating that your promo talks about fact or fiction and the truth. I established with Fox Network right away that the show Alien Autopsy, fact or fiction, would be literally just that. My host, Jonathan Frakes, would say, you'll have to decide for yourself. We said that many times throughout the show, and that became the kind of the calling card for my work at both Fox and also NBC Universal. So what I'm saying to you is I'm about the fact or fiction ? And getting the answer. Not fanning the subject matter simply for a rating point or some kind of income, or create fiction, which will be like a nice, a water cooler or a fireside chat kind of entertainment moment. I'm absolutely trying to get to the bottom of it. And when people say they're trying to get to the bottom of it, but then they don't really look to be doing that, you have to call them out on that. You must do that. Otherwise, what's the point? We have a disingenuine kind of, research base, if you will. So on that note, I found that I was looking at antigravitical research as a serious offshoot of UFOs, because Admiral Bobby Ray Inman, as I was saying before the break, head of the NSA, deputy director of the CIA, number 2 man, he felt there was something truly to study after he left those places. And I said, I agree with that. And so I moved into that mentality while I was doing my other TV work. And I found out that Joe Firmage, who had been a legend in the 90s for giving up what appeared to be a lucrative career in the dot-com business and the web design business. He was a pioneer in web design and apps. And he gave all that up because he had an epiphany. And apparently, so the epiphany, as the story goes, and we heard it back in the 90s when I was doing my shows at Fox, that Joe had some kind of a visitation. It was a visitation that made a big impact on him, and he felt motivated, for whatever reason, to give a complete devotion to the subject of UFOs and maybe antigravitical research, advanced physics, the whole 9 yards. And he gave it all up for that. So when in 2017, I determined sometime around the time that Tom DeLonge was coming out with his, YouTube video where he was sitting there on stage, apparently some kind of a pseudo press conference, if you will, where there's no press, just like an empty room. And on the stage, we have these characters, and there they are. Hal Putoff. Well, Hal again, there you are. We'll talk about Hal in a minute. A new player in the group. Jim Simivan, former CIA. I don't know. Didn't know where the guy came from. Just popped up on stage. And then we have, of course, Tom DeLonge, former rock musician, wannabe UFO researcher. Wonderful. Like many musicians, into UFOs. We could talk about that someday. The connection between music and UFOs. Not shocking to me at all. I did a story about John Lennon years ago, who saw UFOs on a UFO on a building in New York and wrote about it in a song and talked a lot about UFOs before he died. So the idea that Tom DeLonge is into UFOs, look, John Lennon beat him to it, okay? Many others did as well. So the question really is, what was this To the Stars Academy in 2017 when they sort of announced they were going to have this new company that was going to do advanced physics and maybe even do entertainment? I didn't know what to make of that at all. But about the same time, it just ironically, I think, no other reason, it was just ironic and maybe coincidental in some ways, I was looking at antigravitical research and I found Joe. And Joe asked me right away in November of 2017, he said, Robert, what do you know about To the Stars Academy? And I said, well, Joe, what I know is they look like an entertainment company. They look like they're gonna float the idea they've got some evidence from somewhere. Apparently, this guy Lou Elizondo was in the DOD. He's got some access to some material and some video material. It looks like, and it's going to be released, and they're going to use that to get money and people excited about developing antigravitical research and advanced physics. I guess he goes, do you think they have any advanced physics? I said, I don't think so. From what I'm seeing, it's an idea. They'd like to. This guy, Steve Justice from the Lockheed Group, he apparently retired, and now he's going to bring Lockheed into the mix somehow. I guess. I didn't understand it. To this day, I'm not quite sure what Steve Justice is really doing in the company beyond he has experience developing technology, whatever. But so Joe kept asking me, what do you make of this academy? And I said, well, I just told you. He says, well, look at our name of our company. And the company he was pitching me more or less to come work for him was a company called INTERNASA, the International Academy of Arts and Sciences. Sounds very similar to TTSA. Wow, interesting. Academy, sciences. What's the cross point here? Hal Putoff. Hal Putoff again. Hal Putoff, apparently, Joe made it very clear to me, was involved in his research for many years. Joe apparently did some work for the CIA and Ron Pandolfi, who, by the way, let's just break down Ron Pandolfi for a second. Ron came into my sphere of knowledge back in 1994. I wrote an article for Omni magazine, a very credible science magazine, and I wrote the cover article on the face on Mars, what NASA knew about Cydonia, the pyramidal structures near this face-like mountain, if you will, a mesa. No one seemed to know much about this. No one seemed to know really what NASA was saying. I said I could get access to these scientists and I could do an article. Omni said, great. They commissioned me to write the article. When the article came out in 1994, August, in the same edition as my article, there was an article about Bruce Maccabee, a top Navy optical physicist who later became a member of my research group, and it was in my shows. You can see him, both in Unsolved Mysteries and also in my own shows on the Fox network. And so Bruce Maccabee, in this article in Omni magazine, not the one I wrote, a separate article in the same edition, it was an article about how Bruce Maccabee was having kind of secret little meetings with the CIA and Ron Pandolfi. But these weren't really secret meetings. They were little like presentations he would give to the people at the CIA about UFOs. They would get together and they would have kind of like paper bag lunches. They would bring their bologna sandwich or whatever, turkey, roast beef, whatever, and they would have their little lunch and they would talk about UFOs. No big deal. I don't think that's really anything secretive or whatever. So they interviewed Ron. Ron said Bruce was a friend and that they were interested in these kind of subjects, whatever. No big deal. But I knew who Ron was from that moment. So I talked to Bruce over the years many times about Ron. Bruce wrote about Ron in a book he did about the UFO and FBI-CIA connection. And so I knew that Ron was an interesting and fascinating guy. So when, I could tell you more about this, by the way, Bruce wrote a book, so it's in the book, you can read it. Back in the Clinton administration, the Clinton science advisor wanted a briefing on UFOs. So they went to Ron, who, let's determine who Ron is. Ron is a top scientist with the CIA. He ran something called the Weird Desk at the CIA. Anything to do with kind of like UFOs, this type of thing, it conflates very much with spying. The Russians and the Chinese, if they want to look into, aerospace development in the United States, and they want to know about our rocketry, our nuclear weapons, space-based weapons, well, if you take a look at the UFO field, you get a little bit of a prism into that. So Ron's job was to look at that, conflation of UFOs, how maybe other spies were looking into UFOs, and maybe there was nothing true about aliens visiting the Earth, but at least from that cross point, you could study what the enemy was maybe looking at us for. So that's my understanding of how Ron looked at UFOs, but I never spoke to him at that point. In fact, I only spoke to him most recently for the first time. But we'll get into that in a minute. So what happened was it looked to me like when the article came out in Omni magazine that I wrote, and I knew about Ron from 94 on, if the time ever came I need to speak to Ron, I would. I never needed one. I never had a need, really. So Joe told me back in 2017 that he wanted to kind of compete. The idea seemed to be his academy was the real academy, because he was developing a technology, I should say, where it was real. He was trying to develop something you could put your hands on. You could see it. To the Stars Academy, we're all hypothetical. Everything was hypothetical. But Joe literally had a device he was trying to perfect. And it looked to me, for all intents and purposes, that Ron Pandolfi at the CIA had become friendly with Joe for many, many years, was helping Joe develop this technology, and was giving him support, guidance in every way to see if he could bring this technology into like prominence. And so Joe asked me very, very specifically, would you help us create something like a real academy, where you would do TV shows, documentaries, you would build up the public's awareness of my advanced technology, you would maybe bring together some of the UFO research years ago, but more than anything, we would be establishing a real connection with the public, and you would be the one helping us. Would you come aboard? And eventually I agreed. So I gave them a media plan. I said, if you have a device that could actually float with no, known kinds of physics involved, a brand new level of physics, then I would be more than happy to develop a media plan. So I gave them one. It was a 6 to 8 month plan of how they would bring this technology into prominence. And my start date was January 1st, 2018. And the one thing Joe asked me to do was, do not speak to Ron Pandolfi. And I was like, well, Joe, look, I don't need to speak to Ron. But if ever I need to speak to Ron, I'll call Bruce. Bruce will hopefully hook me up with Ron, and we'll be talking to Ron. But he asked me not to do that. So I joined the company. We started in January of 2018. The concept was that there was one investor who really wanted to be the man. And the investor, who I thought had already put his money in, the way that it sounded anyway, that everything Joe told my attorney or told me and my attorney learned was that there was a gentleman named Dan Marriott, who is a Marriott member of the Marriott hotel chain and former congressman. And he really wanted to be the main principal and financer of this company. Where Tom DeLonge went out and got crowdfunding essentially to support his company, Joe's version was, I'm going to get Dan Marriott.
And so that was Joe. So I have to just ask you, did you ever speak with Dan?
Yes, absolutely. My job was a multifaceted type of job for Joe, and the contract that I signed was an employment contract with all the bells and whistles that an employment contract comes with: guaranteed salary, insurance is promised, all the stuff a salaried job would have. And the main function to start from New Year's Eve on in January 2018 was literally to get the investors satisfied that we had everything ready to go and we could just hit the ground running.
Right, and sorry, I want to throw this in here because I think it's important for people to understand. So, like you mentioned, Dan Marriott is from a very, very prominent family here in Utah, and Joe Firmage, his father, was a law professor at the University of Utah, again, and also a very prominent figure in the Mormon community, like Dan Marriott, and so all of these people have that the LDS connection, and then being from very affluent families, and so I think that's probably
Save me the trouble of saying all that. So you know about Joe's father, which I tended to know a little bit about, and I learned a lot very quickly. It was a very fast study, or I was a fast study. So I realized who all the players were, and the disappointing aspect was Joe could not get Dan and a few other investors to pull the trigger on the funding, so I had to put all my effort in with Joe initially to get out press releases to more or less through LinkedIn to get people clear that we were in business, we were up and running, we have the device being developed, we have essentially intelligence community support. We could not mention Ron's name. It was not something that was okay from what I got from by the activities I was involved with. But it was very clear to me from the very beginning that Dan Marriott wanted to be the sole investor. Joe told me many, many times that was the goal Dan wanted. And Dan also said that if indeed you get any other investors involved besides me, I may not put my money in. But the real problem with that is I was already hired. So where's the money going to come to pay me? I'm giving up a very strong Hollywood career. I did not think for a second I could do both careers equally. So I gave this side shoot, if you will, of my undivided attention. And one of the aspects of my contract was to maybe create a TV series about all of what's going on with disclosure, including Joe's device and Ron and everything else. But that was in the background because initially getting the money into the company, making sure we could operate, that was a huge problem. To be fair, it surely looked like Joe was left at the altar, that he knew and was promised he would be getting this funding. That gave him the confidence to hire me. The bad news is he actually indicated to my attorney and I that he had the money in the bank already. So the problem there is that had he said, I don't have the money yet, Robert, and to my attorney at that time, Michael Weiss, in Beverly Hills, by the way, then the issue then is, well, wait a minute, if you don't have the money, then I can't sign any contract with you. So he hid that from me, apparently. And so when it became unequivocally clear in the first month that we had a problem, we had the assistance of someone very close to Ron Pandolfi enter the scene, and he volunteered to go to Joe's house and try, like an emissary, to explain to Dan Marriott, with my assistance, who is Ron Pandolfi, how does he have a connection to this whole thing, why that should be enough for Dan Marriott to put the money in. And so it became this kind of like tete-a-tete between this individual Ron had working with him, Dan Marriott, me, and Joe, trying to get clear, how are we going to get the money in to be able to keep our company going? It just became a very painful process. And it went on for months and months. But I must say that during that time, the individual that was working with Pandolfi, he came to me and he said, I have a show that I think we could get going which will tie in a little bit to your work. I said, okay, well, look, I told Joe that we have in the contract, or Joe and I worked out in the contract, that if indeed there was a way to make a TV series with either Ron's support or anybody else's support in the disclosure movement, if you will, I would love to do that. It's what I do for a living. But we never seemed to get clear what Ron would bring to the table if we did a show like that. So I went out and talked to my contacts both in New York and Hollywood. I went on these sojourns, if you will, to New York. I talked to the people in the news division of one of these huge broadcast networks. I talked to the entertainment division of that same broadcast network. It looked like we had the chance to make a series, so at least my time was not being wasted completely. Part of my work for the company was to develop a series, so I figured, well, why not? Let's give it a shot. So that show is in matriculation. We are literally still trying to make that show, but that show does not connect yet to the company that Joe has, because Joe's company does not have the funding apparently, or they're not telling me they have the funding. They're basically leaving me without getting paid for a year. Imagine a year of not getting paid.
Well, and I have to say that when you looked into the background of Firmage or maybe people involved, were there any other red flags historically as to whether this might be the common practice?
Yes, the red flags were obvious from day one. That Joe had problems with people that claimed that they were not paid, that literally they were owed money and whatever. And what's funny is the guy working for Ron, or working with Ron in some capacity, said to Joe, Joe, you asked Bob Kiviat to come in from Hollywood and help you communicate to your investors that you're not that guy. You're not going to leave people in any weird way with money. You're going to pay bills. You're going to do all that stuff. And Bob is out there trying to defend you. And now you're going to do the same thing to Bob that you did to those people. That's crazy. So I give that guy credit. I won't name him right now, but he was right what he said. And I think he was coming from the right place. He was saying to Joe, look, you got to find a way to get Dan Marriott to do the right thing here. Because what Dan said over and over was, Bob, I'll put money into the company. I want to put money into the company. But first I have to know if Ron Pandolfi's real and really from the CIA or the intelligence community. And number two, is he really supporting Joe in this technology? And number three, I need to see lift. I need to see this device lift off the ground or off a table. And I said, Dan, I repeated what Joe said to Dan. Dan, if we had that, we'd have everybody coming to us for funding us. So, that's the bottom line.
And there's the music, and we've got to definitely get into this a little bit more. This is a great show, I had no doubt. So I am here with Robert Kiviat. Thank you so much. Okay. I am Erica Lukes. Stick around because we've got one more segment and lots of interesting things to reveal.
Stand by.
This is UFO Classified with Erica Lukes.
Erica Lukes.
The phone lines are open now at 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio. More UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
With Erica Lukes on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. After this.
Some knowledge belongs to us and us alone. The way our girlfriends walk, the way they talk, the way they touch their hair. We hold details that only a sister can know about her girls. But what about our other girls? The ones that we carry with us every day. Can we describe them when everything's right? Can we feel when something's wrong? Our bond with our sister girls gives life. But knowing your breasts can save it. Go to knowyourgirls.org for the facts you need on breast health. That's knowyourgirls.org. Brought to you by Susan G. Coleman and the Ad Council.
Live for 3 hours every Saturday night. It's a show that engages the mind, makes you think, and maybe even challenge what you think you know. Hi, I'm Jeremy Scott of Into the Paranormal, where we talk about topics that are anything but mainstream, somewhere between abnormal and paranormal. Bring an open mind and join us for Into the Paranormal, live Saturdays at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern on the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
30 seconds and counting.
Broadcasting to you from another planet, beaming you a world of entertainment.
This is the world-famous KCOR. Now listen live online at KCORradio.com.
I like everything about this station.
When do I listen? Like 24 hours a day.
It's my favorite station. I just love the music. It keeps me going at work.
There is a world outside that which we live in, a realm where fact and fiction collide. The Paradigm Matrix. The Paradigm Matrix. Hosted by Willie Miranda every Friday night at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us, even now in this very room.
The 1-hour show that will surely leave you hanging on the edge of the rabbit hole. The Paradigm Matrix explores a universe of topics from UFOs, cryptozoology, conspiracies, as well as all things paranormal.
Enter a world of the twisted and deformed.
Friday night, 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern. The Paradigm Matrix, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network, where fact and fiction collide.
1, 2, 3, 4.
To the KCOR Digital Radio Network.
I love the way it sounds. Love the music. I listen all day.
The future of radio is here and now.
You're listening to UFO Classified with Erica Lukes, where the truth isn't hidden beneath the black lines of a Sharpie.
That's the craziest thing I've ever heard.
To be on with Erica, call 702-425-9230. That's 702-425-9230. Worldwide callers use Skype name KCOR Radio.
Radio contact.
Share your thoughts on the show on Twitter by using hashtag KCOR. Or head over to the live chats at KCORradio.com.
The audience goes nuts.
And now, your host of UFO Classified.
Are you ready?
Erica Lukes. Erica Lukes.
Welcome back to another exciting episode of UFO Classified. I am here with Robert Kiviat, who is a producer. He has been responsible for Alien Autopsy, Fact or Fiction, UFOs, The Best Evidence Ever Caught on Tape 1 and 2, Miracles and Visions, Fact and Fiction, a lot of things that you have all seen on TV. I have no doubt about that. And he is most recently was asked to become involved with Joe Firmage, who is an entrepreneur and made it big when he was very, very young in the tech industry. And people have been linking Hal Puthoff and different members in the intelligence community and different contractors with Firmage. And so tonight we're going to talk about that a little bit more. And so, just begin again, because this is
all right. Let's go. Let's try to help your listeners get a really shorthand on this whole thing. So Hal Puthoff is a scientific kind of guy, very, very well established, very, very smart guy, great credentials in the academia world. And he was well known for helping pioneer remote viewing research at Stanford Research Institute, which ironically is the same place a lot of the study of the face on Mars went on years ago, which I also crossed into in my coverage for Omni magazine. So Hal Puthoff was pioneering remote viewing at a time with Uri Geller and things like that, and getting into psychic power. And he was well known for that. Unfortunately, most people credit Ron Pandolfi, and Ron does credit it himself, for closing down the remote viewing program years ago. So essentially, Ron goes back with Hal, at least back to that time, or maybe even earlier than that. But that's the time Ron knows him.
So why would he shut down the remote? Why would Pandolfi shut down?
Because there was no proof it did anything. let's be clear about remote viewing, okay? I had the privilege, I guess, of doing a story years ago with Geraldo Rivera at a show called Now It Can Be Told, before I ever went to Unsolved Mysteries. And this show for Geraldo Rivera was Now It Can Be Told, a straight-up journalistic investigation show, really. And we were covering a lot of things. That's where I did a story about John Lennon who saw UFOs. Ronald Reagan wrote me a letter about a UFO sighting he had years later, and I did a story about that. So, I mean, after he was president, he wrote me a letter because I did a story about a UFO sighting he had when he was governor of California. So in all of that work I did at Now It Can Be Told, another story I did was about General Albert Stubblebine III, former Army intelligence guy, literally head of Army intelligence, that he was called the spoon bender by people because he would have a spoon hanging down from his desk, claiming he could bend the spoon with his mind. These people were really in the government. They really believed they could use psychic power and remote viewing. You know, remote viewing essentially is some psychic type person sitting down and viewing with their mind, maybe weapons of mass destruction, whatever it could be in a secret vault somewhere, basically using nothing more than their mind. There are a few different techniques, but overall, that's the concept. Pandolfi, as I understand it, felt there was nothing to it and closed it down because that's his job.
I have to ask you, what are Pandolfi's religious beliefs?
Whoa, that's a big stretch. But I wanted to add one thing before we get to that, and I'll do my best. I don't know how to answer a question like that, but I will say that Ron's job at the CIA was as a top scientist. So they would come to him and say, I assume, what do you think of this program that we're putting money into, Ron? And Ron would say, I'll look into it. And he determined that there was nothing there. He has some association with the Men Who Stared at Goats movie years ago. And we'll talk about that if you want. But overall, Ron literally put that thing to rest. So it was more or less putting Hal Puthoff out of business in remote viewing. But Ron, according to a recent conversation I had with Ron, he told me that he literally looks at him as a techno scam artist. On the other hand, he needs sometimes people to look into scams. So what better person to look into scams than one that could pull off scams? Interesting, right?
And so what type of scams is Pandolfi pulling off? Because when I look at some of the people,
I didn't say he's pulling off any scams.
Okay, I have to say, like Dan Smith, some of these Jack Sarfati, I mean, some of these videos and things that are coming out online, it's like, where does one differentiate this is not a scam and then one look at Puthoff and say that is? Because to me it's all...
Well, when I say scam, I'm just using that term very, very loosely. How about things that are not legitimate, that have not been proven in any way, shape, and form, that are pseudoscience to most people, and then he gets people to put money into these adventures, if you will, and none of it really pans out for sure. And so people lose money, people have stress, all kinds of concerns that happen. And so that's just not naturally something you would say is a very credible enterprise, right?
Right. And that's the same thing that has been people have accused Joe Firmage of.
Well, hold on. So yes, Firmage has been accused throughout the years. And to be clear, just so everyone understands, Firmage did something for the CIA years ago, or the intelligence community, that probably was unrelated to antigravitational research or anything else, but it got him into the mix. People knew who he was and everything else, and they appreciated him. Ron calls Joe a friend. In fact, Ron's defense in this whole thing is he didn't really support the company. He wasn't really on the phone with Joe all the time, and Joe and Ron's operative, who is now living at Joe's house, by the way. We'll get back to that story in a minute. So summing it all up, I really asked Joe to tell me who was this guy that Ron brought in. And according to Joe, Ron brought this guy in to help Joe develop the device. His job was to stand over Joe and make sure that device performed. And they could bring that device to, I'm not going to say specifically DARPA or government military type organizations that want to develop the highest end, technology for our world and maybe even, beat the Russians and beat the Chinese to all these technologies. But what I'm saying to you is in general, that was the relationship. So, Ron's job, as I saw it, was to push Joe to make this device the best it could be on a deadline. There was a deadline, and that deadline seemed to be sometime in May. In May of 2018 or so, as my court case, I'm about to file suit against Dan Marriott, Joe Firmage, and Ron Pandolfi. And that document should be filed in court in the next week or two. There are some negotiations going on. There are some discussions about maybe we could avert the lawsuit. But if the lawsuit goes through, my attorney and I plan to get into all these areas, every single one of them, from To the Stars Academy, Ron Pandolfi's involvement in Joe Firmage's company, Dan Marriott's involvement. Why is he trying to become the number one investor? Why does he need to be the only investor, the sole investor? What's interesting to him so much that's that area of Salt Lake City, Utah, maybe the Mormon Church? What is so interesting about this that he would fascinate himself and focus on this so much? And also, for the Dan Marriott part of the story, why would he have to be a monopoly? Why does he have to have a monopoly on this thing, So by asking for the monopoly from Joe, he froze the company. But he knew I was working. And so I guess right about the time that it became clear that I was not being paid a lot of money I was owed, and other people in the company were probably also looking for pay, I guess, engineers, I guess, I don't know. Dan Marriott did put some money into the company. He paid me a very small amount of money to more or less show good faith, I guess, a very, very small amount. But that amount, at least according to my attorney, is clearly an indication of a sense of responsibility and a sense of culpability in keeping me going there. Because let's face it, I'm traveling to New York. I'm traveling around the country trying to make a TV series that will help this company grow. And this show would be somewhat giving the company revenue if indeed it went through. But that show is still happening. It's like that show is not yet a dead deal. That show could easily happen. So what I'm saying to you is the only real substantive value of my year working with Firmage, Pandolfi, and Marriott is the series that I developed and pitched to several networks, not just the one I told you about on the East and West Coast, but other ones as well. So we have that show ready to go if we could just pull the money together. But more than anything, I'm in an employment contract arrears lawsuit, really, to recover the monies of my salary. But really more than that, we want to be able to shine a spotlight into the entire affair and how this conflates to the Stars Academy.
I don't see, like, to me, I mean, I'm seeing that this is an issue specifically with Pandolfi and Firmage, because they're the ones who have entered into a contract with you and they're not paying you.
Well, no, actually, Ron is acting more or less as the behind the scenes scientist for the CIA, giving credibility to the technology. He's not necessarily the co-signer of the contract. I can't disagree with you more fervently than this. It is a look into the entire UFO CIA weird desk connection and all the secrets of the UFO field. No one's ever brought a case to trial like this, ever. And this will be an opportunity for all the world to look into what the CIA knows, what Ron's involvement has been. It's not just about the lawsuit about the contract of my arrears salary or salary arrears. It's not. It's much more than that. So when the complaint is filed in California, it will be looked into by journalists all over the country. And that's really what we're looking at right now.
And so, I mean, right now, are you continuing to work for them? Or are you going to just cut your losses and then try to find something? I know you've got the show that you want to get out there, but I mean, is it the best bet to work for people that have and there have been accusations that this has been commonplace, and that's why back in 2010, why perhaps Putoff and some of those people stepped away from working with Firmage?
No, I think the story is much, much more simpler than that. In 2009 and 2010, the former head of the CIA's Weird Desk, Ron's predecessor, Kit Green, and Hal Putoff, the very same man that is now the kind of brain trust of To the Stars Academy, and another individual who now owns Skinwalker Ranch, who's also from Utah, by the way. They were working on a company together, all trying to get this technology off the ground, no pun intended, in 2009, 2010. That was a forerunner attempt to what is going on now with this company. So Hal Putoff, Kit Green, this is now documented in every way, shape, and form, and it will come out at trial. The early round of Firmage's attempt to create this device involved Hal Putoff, Kit Green, like I said, this is Ron Pandolfi's predecessor at the CIA's Weird Desk. And so what you're looking at here is a 10-year period where Joe was involved with these people. It does not mean, though, that he did the right things. He probably owed people money for other problems he's gone through. Look, everybody who's look at Donald Trump. Donald Trump is president of the United States.
That's not a good example.
He single-handedly destroyed like 3 casinos in Atlantic City. His record of bankruptcy is legendary. He's president of the United States today. So the question really is, could Joe Firmage still develop an anti-gravity device with Ron's help and Dan Marriott's money, even though he left other people hurting? I just point you back to the White House right now. There are people that say Donald Trump left many people, small contractors, literally broke while he got out of it with a Chapter 11 or 13, 12 or whatever it is, Chapter 11, business bankruptcies. So all I'm saying to you is, why would someone walk away from Firmage just because he had business problems when our president of the United States also had those same exact kind of problems? So I just throw that out to you and your viewers or listeners right now. And back to your question, my main career is as a TV producer, investigative journalist. My production company still exists. I still create programs for the networks. My last one was for NBC Sci-Fi called Aliens on the Moon, The Truth Exposed. My next one could very well be the Definitive Disclosure series on UFOs with or without Dan Marriott, Joe Firmage, and Ron Pandolfi. However, what an interesting combination it could be if I'm able to do it all together. The main issue is financing properly, making sure that we stay on track. I'm still officially working for the company. I've not been fired. I've not quit. I'm in my second year of the contract. That continues to roll. The money continues to accrue. And we're not really sure, my lawyer and I, what these guys are thinking. It's almost like they're waiting for the bombshell to drop and the lawsuit's filed in a few days, and we're off and running. So we hope they're willing to come to the table and talk to us, because I get no pleasure in bringing someone in like Ron Pandolfi into a litigation like this, because I do respect his service for this country. He indicated to me he's still in the CIA, I think, in every way he indicated it to me. Didn't say it in exact words, but I think anybody who heard what he said would interpret it that way. And he is trying to be a nice guy. He's trying to tell me now that, no, Bob, Joe's a friend. Joe's a problem. He's a problem. He's got problems, but Joe's a friend. And I was trying to just give Joe some moral support to get him off of certain little problems he's got. And I said, Ron, you mean you were not helping to develop the company? Come on. I was there every day on the phone. Joe would say, I gotta go. Ron's calling. I'd be on the phone with his operative that he sent more or less to Joe's house. And literally, I'd be speaking to that individual, and every time I'm on the phone with the guy, I'd be like, oh, gotta go. Ron's calling.
And that's Kevin Albers, right? Because I think Grant Cameron has mentioned him, and Grant threw out that he used to work for the Mossad.
I don't know if he worked for Mossad. Look, no comment on Kevin. I'm not going to sit here and, you didn't hear me name him, by the way, right? So
no, it was me.
and again, I'm not going to mention Kevin, because I think I have more appreciation for Kevin's issues, and Kevin probably realizes. And Kevin and I had to work very closely together for about 4 or 5 months before the big event that was supposed to happen in Colorado. And that big event was going to be some sort of live demonstration of the object or the device, which, by the way, I had laid out a 5 or 6 month media plan to roll out that device. So I was really surprised when they went dark literally in June or so of 2018. And Kevin told me that basically they were just going to go dark and work on the machine and not worry about people's salaries and not worry about anything. And I was like, what do you mean you're not going to worry about things? I mean, you can't operate that way, right? So that's when things got sticky, and it continued on throughout the year. And finally now here's where we are. So again, there's probably more information coming out tonight in your show than any other yet so far, because the lawsuit clock is ticking and my lawyer's preparing to file the suit. So we're trying to make sure that the people that are aware of this, such as the individuals involved, they will be really taking this seriously and not thinking this is just a grandstanding or some kind of a, media ploy. This is real. This is real life stuff happening right here.
And so I have to ask you, because there have been a lot of people talking about the portal technology, and I know that people have come to town in that group, and they're trying to talk to different Utah researchers, and so what's up with the portal technology? Does that magic little machine, can it open portals?
Well, I can tell you unequivocally that Joe never felt that was what the machine was being developed for. He was told that. It's like, hey, by the way, your machine might also be an actuator for portal opening. But look, the story that people may be confused by is, on a totally separate track, Ron started to put the word out through Grant Cameron and a guy named Dan Smith, or maybe the other way around, Dan Smith and Grant Cameron, that his wife was an interdimensional portal traveling being, and that there's going to be a discovery, or discoveries are being made, that portals are opening up around the planet, and that these portals could be utilized to do interdimensional travel and things like that. Now, that sounds like a limited hangout, and that term meaning the CIA puts kind of nonsense out with truth. And therefore, you have two things happening at the same time. You've got the government or pseudo-government or whatever Tom DeLonge and Hal and those people at Two Stars Academy are claiming about UFOs happening on both coasts of the United States, separated by a decade almost, these tic-tac craft, if you will. And then, on top of that, you've got Ron Pandolfi claiming, through his wife, really, that portals are opening up at the same time. Now, I don't know if there's a connection to those two different things, but that's what we have now. And in my series, we will look into that. But as of right now, I'm not aware of any portals opening. If you could show me evidence of that, I would love that.
Yeah, no. I mean, and that's the thing that's been interesting to me, is to see some of the researchers in the field say that this device is opening portals, and
that's all,
and
made
their
up.
different demonstration.
Erica,
I agree. I absolutely
it's
agree.
It's coming from mainly, and so people understand this, and it will come out at trial if we do go to trial. That's coming from Ron's wife holding go-to type meetings on the internet where she's getting people excited about this story. And so it's been planted. Now, Ron explained to me what that whole story is about. I don't think it's appropriate for me to say exactly on the air with you tonight what that story is about. But I can tell you right now, he poo-pooed it. He literally basically retracted it.
Oh, and so, I mean, and Dan Smith, I mean, where does he come into all of this? Because
it
people
was
seem
all
to
for
follow.
Dan. It was all for Dan. Do you want to believe that? It's fine.
Well,
It was all for Dan's benefit, that story. That's the story.
Okay, because people, they think, a lot of people think that Dan is a god, and they follow him. And
wait a minute, why would Dan be considered a god?
I don't know.
Dan is an interesting guy. In 1991, he apparently, according to Dan, I've had many conversations because Ron wanted me to really get to know Dan over the last few months when this lawsuit was sort of matriculating. Ron felt it was important for me to talk a lot to Dan. which he arranged for me. So I talked to Dan many, many hours over the last few months. And Dan's an interesting guy. Dan has had both a father very involved in the government. Dan has connections, he says, to Aleister Crowley, the sorcerer.
That's not a thing I'd be bragging about, but maybe.
Well, before we end tonight, we should get into the fact that the government does seem to suggest through Harry Reid that UFOs have a demonic connection. So when you throw this all into the pile and try to figure it out, they according to Ron, he was telling Dan this story about the portals, maybe to kind of goof with him a little bit. But Dan has been a very strong, confidant to Ron over the years. Whatever their relationship is, I'm not quite sure of all of it, but it's a fascinating one. So for whatever reasons, he's given Dan a private story about these portals that Dan has gone wild and told everybody about. And Grant Cameron likes to believe he's got the inside story on this thing. But ironically, Ron recently wrote some really kind of crazy missive involving me or whatever. And then Grant Cameron wrote back, well, I guess Ron's throwing Joe under the bus. I didn't hear Ron throwing Joe under the bus on the call we had recently. I heard Ron actually supporting Joe, just like he was supporting Joe in the company and his anti-gravity research. And Ron seems to be a friend of Joe's and cares about Joe. So I believe that's genuine. I do.
And I will say that the people that have worked with Joe, genuinely care about him and think that he's a very brilliant human being.
Not everyone.
Well, yeah.
The new owner of Skinwalker Ranch might beg to differ with you on that one, but that's for a future discussion.
Yeah, I've honestly have just heard that people really supported him and they wanted to work with him because they understood that he was a very brilliant man and things might have gone south. But
Erica, I said it. I'll say it loud and clear to you again before we end tonight. At trial, it's likely the other person I'm telling you about who owns Skinwalker Ranch will either have to explain it or will ask him to explain it why he doesn't believe that Joe has that ultra respectability and credibility. I'm not quite sure what to make of that relationship, and we're still looking at that right now.
Yeah, I think that it was the circumstance of somebody researching or putting money into research and then not having that come into fruition. But it's amazing. And thank you so much for being here. Where can people find you?
My pleasure.
Where can people find you? We got it really quick.
Oh, you can just find me just look up my name and you can find me on the internet. You can call me, my production company, the whole thing.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much. Have a good night, everyone. I'm Erica Lukes here on UFO Classified. Next week, make sure you're here because it'll be a good show. It might have to do with my favorite organization. Have a good night. Stick around for Willie Miranda and stay safe.
Listen very carefully.
This is Houston. Say again, please. Houston, we've had a problem.
This is UFO Classified, live every Friday night, 4 p.m. Pacific, 7 p.m. Eastern, exclusively on the KCOR Digital Radio Network. The truth is out there, just waiting to be discovered.
And now, if you will, accompany me on a journey to the future.
For more information on the host of UFO Classified, Erica Lukes, upcoming guests, as well as links to the past shows,
visit her website at ufoclassified.com.
UFO Classified.
UFO Classified.
This is KCOR Las Vegas, home of the Digital Radio Network, broadcasting from